this effing show, man. What's up, guys? Welcome back to Man of Mischief, or Loki in review. We're here for season 2, guys, episode 4, and my god. The last 15 minutes of this episode, guys, I don't consider myself someone who really gets shocked too often or audibly gasps at things. I had my jaw on the floor the last 20 minutes, and especially the last few minutes, guys. What a damn show. My name is Kyle, guys. Thanks for checking out Prodigy P, the channel. Go check out the other content, guys, but we're here for Loki. Now, this is part of a 2-part series. I forgot to post last week's episode, guys. I went through, I edited the episode, I did everything, forgot to put it up. We get a second straight episode with Jonathan Majors as Victor Timely. Another fantastic episode. It's shot a little bit differently. They do some little weird camera shakes, but it's all so good, guys. If you haven't seen the series before, welcome to our Loki review. We got our Loki shirt here, guys, our variant jacket, and our Loki hat, of course, for season 2. What I'm going to do is give you guys a favorite character who's born to rule, a Get Help award, which is the least favorite character, a score out of 10, along with some of my favorite scenes. And guys, let's hop into the loom. I mean, where do I begin? There's so much that happened in this episode. Obviously, full spoilers, guys. This is a review. Go watch the episode first and then go watch this. But we start off, the end of time, we saw He Who Remains' body decaying there. We're like, what's going on? Time shouldn't move there. Well, guess what? The loom's imploding. Everything's going crazy. Branches are dead. Some branches are alive. Dox's people are there for now. All that stuff is going on. Remember, Miss Minutes was like, hey, I have a secret about you, but you're going to get really angry. And we're like, what's going on here? She's probably working with Kang, working with He Who Remains. She was working with He Who Remains. Then we find out that she was actually the one that was leading the charge, and she's like, okay, I'll see you back at the TVA, and he's like, I'll catch up with you. And as soon as he said, I will catch up with you, he's not going to catch up, dude. He's not going to catch up with her. Erase the memories. And I was like, but why though? And he's like, Protocol 42, I think he called it. And Miss Minutes is like, you want to erase all their memories? And he's like, yep, all of their memories. And then, she does it, and he says, I'm sorry. So that kind of confirmed what we suspected, which is He Who Remains. We thought he created the TVA, but then there's a scene later on, guys, with Obi and Victor Timely, and we get into that. But I think we kind of suspected that, but this confirms that, yes, He Who Remains absolutely, for whatever reason, took all of the TVA agents and just said wipe their memories, so they don't know where that they got there. And he, in turn, betrays Ravonna, and then she doesn't find out till obviously right now when Miss Minutes reveals that. So I thought that was really interesting. I don't know exactly what that means and how it all fits in. This episode was astounding, but a lot of it was confusing, even though they do dumb it down, and Obi is kind of the one who speaks to the audience, where he says, look, you gotta go out there, you gotta go down the walkway, and he's basically saying, well, you gotta do what Mobius did in the first episode, which was incredible. Although this time the loom is worse, it's expanding, the effects were incredible. But guys, we get another thing that was kind of floating around there that was confirmed. Loki is actually the one who pruned Loki, which I was like, very cool visually. And I was like, what does that all mean for everything? And then Loki even tells Sylvie, this is all going to make sense later, I promise. And I'm like, is it though? Is it though, Loki? But I trust that these writers, whoever's in charge of Loki, season 1 and season 2, I just trust that they're going to explain it, and it's going to be crazy. And guys, we have 2 episodes to go, and the way this episode ends, I'm kind of jumping around here, guys, but my god. First of all of the interactions, loved him going around. He's like, I invented all this, and Jonathan Majors, dude, my goodness. I'm going to give you guys a kind of a quick spoiler now, because usually I have a very strict, favorite scenes, Born to Rule, Help Award. We're going to kind of mix Born to Rule and my favorite scenes here, because there's so much going on in this episode, guys. I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to pick one, but I'm going to pick 2 people in this one. It's Tom Hiddleston as Loki, and it's Jonathan Majors as Victor Timely / He Who Remains, because my goodness, they were so good. And Mobius too. Owen Wilson, very, very good. Sylvie is still kind of lashing out, and she's like, dude, you haven't looked at your life yet. Sylvie's play solace, I don't know if I'm really vibing with it. But Tom Hiddleston as Loki, dude, that scene in the pie room where he's talking to Sylvie and they have that great conversation, and Tom Hiddleston is just bringing it, dude. Where he's talking about how you can't have free will and then walk away or something like that. I'm butchering the line probably, but she says, either way, we're playing God. And then Loki just looks down and he goes, we are gods. And he walks into the camera. I was like, oh my God, dude, so cool. The whole interaction was great. And I love how they're constantly like reminding you of the impending doom and that everything is time sensitive because of the lights constantly going out and things shaking. And it has very much like Lost vibes in this episode and in this season, really. And it's so good. And it feels like everything important in the MCU is around the TVA, and season 1 of Loki felt like there were some big ramifications, and we're kicking off the multiverse, and at the time leading into Doctor Strange and No Way Home and all that stuff, like we were like, dude, this is going to explain how we can get all these heroes back and do this and mess around with time. And it feels like this series is now doing that same thing where it's affecting the greater MCU. And we know there's like Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars coming. We know all that. And it's like, how do they set that up? Loki season 2 is doing such an amazing job, especially with this episode. Now, what's going to happen? Are they going to all get obliterated? Probably not. Something's probably going to happen. But when they bring Victor Timely in, and guys, I'm sorry, I'm jumping around my own, I'm like cutting myself off here. But him going around, being like fascinated with the hot chocolate machine, and Mobius is like, you're really interested in this machine, aren't you? Great stuff. And then the guy, Brad prunes him, and it turns out Brad is like a psychopath, dude. He'll do anything to get back to Brad Wolf timeline, The scene where Dox's people die, how badass was that? The Dox stands there, and we've seen that machine, I think it was episode 2, guys, when Loki's messed around with it, and we saw how scared Brad was of it. But Brad is trying to get to the timeline, and Dox is like, wow, your life is really that great on the timeline, right? And he's like kind of not saying anything, but you can tell he's like kind of being pulled in 2 different directions. Dox and her people just get surrounded by this giant square. Miss Minutes, dude. You can tell Miss Minutes is tapped because she is like feeling this. And as the box is going down, dude, Dox is just standing there. And I talked about how I didn't like Dox. I think Dox was my least favorite character. I think it was the Get Help last week. Dude, Dox standing there and just being like, how does it feel knowing that our people would rather die than stand by your side? As they're getting crushed painfully to death, I was like, dude, that is just baller. And she's just like looking in her eyes as presumably right before that she like gets like crushed. But Brad is standing there and he like feels it, but the sociopath in him like flips, and he's like, I'm committing, dude. Like, I want to get back to that life. And he is giving up all of these people that he worked with for presumably eons, hundreds of years, however long it's been. And the human part of him obviously feels bad, but man, he is like the only one that rolls with Ravonna and Miss Minutes, and clearly they're the villains now, and you're like, dude, and that was after we found out Ravonna was working with He Who Remains. So is she a Kang variant? I don't know, but she's bad, Miss Minutes is bad. And Brad is like, you know what, man, I'm getting on this ride. And it's like, oh man, that scene where they all get crushed in the sounds and everything, I was shocked. I didn't think they were going to do it. I thought they were going to kind of go down and then she would go, okay, stop. But that's the beauty of this season, guys, is that when Loki does that to Brad, he does stop. Because you're like, okay, it's a Disney Plus show. They're probably not going to do anything. But Loki season 2 is just pushing the boundaries, dude. And for her whole team to get crushed, dude, I'm telling you, my mouth was on the floor. My jaw was on the floor, guys. It was crazy. I could not believe they did that. And I was like, oh, okay, this is what we're doing. I was like, this is this vibe of this season, and this, like, they're pushing limits. So I thought that was incredible. And then it really, like, makes you not only kind of hate Brad, who was so fun in the second, I think it was the second episode. And then now you have Ravonna as, like, the villain, and you're like, how is this going to work? And then all the stuff with Victor Timely, the scene where him and Obi are like, wait, who wrote it first? Because like they kind of wrote each other's books or something. And then it was like a chicken and egg scenario. And that was like a moment where I was asking myself like, wait, how does that work? And there were so many scenes in this episode that I was like, oh, that's confusing, but that's really cool. I don't know how that works, but I think they're going to explain it. And then they kind of did explain it, but then I was also like, wait, but what does that mean here? And I just love that one line from Loki, right? Where he's like, I promise this will make sense to you later. And it's like, that's the writers being like, dude, we're cooking right now. And I trust that in these next 2 episodes, these last 2 episodes, they're going to explain things, probably next episode, and everything will make sense to some extent. And so I'm so excited about that. But man, all that stuff is so cool. And just, again, Jonathan Majors putting on a show, dude. He did such a great job of being like really whimsical and curious. And you could see like the gears turning in his head, but also being like kind of afraid. But then him standing up for himself, where they're like, okay, come with us, and he's like, no. He's like, she wants me, the weird clock lady wants me, and he's like, I want to have some say. And then he's like, I built all this, and I'm like, yeah, come on. And eventually at the end they use his DNA to open like the blast doors or whatever, and then they get him geared up, and there's this big triumphant moment, and I'm thinking like, okay, he's probably gonna go there, he's not gonna have time, or something's gonna happen. And he gets in the suit like we saw Mobius do when we saw Mobius go on the moonwalk, and he starts going, and as soon as he hits out there, what Obi said in the first episode, dude, your skin's gonna dissolve, you're gonna immediately disintegrate. And all I could think about was Mobius putting skin on the side. But for Victor Timely to just immediately evaporate, and the sense of dread that they all experience, where they're like, oh my god, and then they see basically like a nuclear explosion of the loom, and they're like, what's going to happen next? And it's like, is it going to kill them? Probably not, but what does that mean? And now I'm thinking like, now there's all this Kang DNA, right? There's all this Victor Timely DNA in everything, and it's like, is that how all the variants come out? And Miss Minutes does tell him right before she's like being rebooted, which was a really cool scene, especially with the effects and everything. She does say, you'll never be him, or something. And I was like, oh dude, that, and in my head I was just like, is that what's going to change him into like, that's how he remains, like he's like, I can't be him, I'll show you, or whatever. But man, dude, what a damn show. And visually it's so pleasing. We also had that weird lady who like kind of sits in her wheelchair like that, and I don't want to make fun of her because I don't know if she has like a disability and she's just got like makeup on, or if like that's her character, but her character is creepy and like unsettling, but she's kind of on her side now. And I just love like how Hunter B-15 is kind of running things now, but then she comes back in after Ravonna just got access through Miss Minutes and just like killed everyone, and she's like horrified of like, this episode is dark, man, and I love that about it. I love it. I love that they're pushing these boundaries and these adult themes, and it's like, it really feels like for the first time the MCU is like not at stake, but like it feels like what happens in this show directly is setting up whatever's happening next to the MCU, and it's just so important, and I just love everything about it, man. So loved this episode, was floored, was stunned, cannot wait for next week. So we already did kind of the Born to Rule award, which was Loki and Victor Timely / He Who Remains. Tom Hiddleston and Jonathan Majors, absolutely brilliant, dude. Mobius, Owen Wilson has Mobius too. We didn't get as much of him, but he was great. But those two, I think, just stood out for me, guys. I don't want to harp on that too much. So we'll go over to the Get Help award, which is my least favorite character. And guys, I gotta say, I don't have anyone this week. Once again, there was no one that stuck out. No weak links. I thought everyone was great. I thought Ravonna was great. She's very good with that character. Brad was interesting, and I love seeing Brad like switch that flip, like, oh, he's a bad dude now. Like Brad is now a villain, where he was just kind of like a fun anti-hero before. Now he's like a full-on villain, and like it shows you how far he's gonna go. And obviously Ravonna's gonna like cross him over and not give him a life or whatever. You know what I mean? So I don't think Brad's gonna make it out, but just everyone was great, and I just love this cast, and it's wonderful. But no weak links, no get helps for this week. Guys, a score? Can you tell? Can you tell what I'm gonna give it? It's the second 10 of the season. It's a masterpiece, dude. I loved this episode. The set design I didn't talk about, dude, it's so clean. It somehow is that futuristic, but it's sort of that 50s or maybe 70s retro style. It's so good. It's so clean. It's all practical. You can tell, obviously, they had to do CG with some stuff, but the lights going in and out, man, like I said, very Lost, almost like Smoke Monster vibes. Very mysterious. I was questioning constantly what's going on, what's happening, but I was like following along pretty well. But I was still like, oh my god, but Obi again is here to kind of explain it. But the interaction between Obi and Victor Timely and how good Jonathan Majors was, and that scene I didn't really touch on enough, guys, but that conversation with Loki and Sylvie. And it's so interesting to see them interact, and they haven't really touched on it, but that whole, I didn't even mention this, guys, the whole conversation Loki has about hope. And he's like, no, he's like, annihilate everything. He's like, burn it all down. He's like, that's easy, huh? But he's like, you know what's hard? Fixing what's broken. He's like, hope. And so she's like, okay, so we get a hope that Victor Timely doesn't become He Who Remains. We get a hope that TV is good. We get a hope that this is better. She's like, that's a lot of hope you're putting in. And I'm like, she's making some good points. It's like that Falcon meme where he's like, he's out of line, but he's right. And so just this dynamic between them. I kind of wish they would touch on like the fact that they were basically in love with each other, and then she kind of stabbed him, and he does a little bit, but like there's kind of like this animosity towards him, and Loki, you can tell like clearly still loves her, and he's trying, and I'm sure there's something there for her too, but I feel like they've kind of misused Sylvie this season, so maybe that will change, but she's felt very just like angry, revenge driven, like I hate the TVA sucks, everything is the worst, like her character was so great in season 1, and I don't like the way she's going to season 2, but 2 episodes to kind of correct that, but man, dude, what a damn episode, and it looks so great, and it was just, it's so well written, and it's so expertly paced, and it's also like genuinely funny, dude. The hot chocolate machine thing the gag was hilarious. I love how it answered questions like who pruned Loki. It was Loki, and that was, I think, kind of obvious. I know, at least I saw a couple of different reviews that were talking about that. I don't know if I mentioned that, probably not, because I'm not good at figuring out like what's going to happen, but I was like, oh, okay, yeah, it was Loki, and then just everything building, and then for it to end the way it ended with Victor Timely immediately getting disintegrated. I don't know why I didn't see that coming. That was crazy. And then just the impending doom, almost like an Empire Strikes Back type of feel, where it ends and you're like, wow, dude, what's going to happen next? They're down, they're out. But this is like, I don't know. Now that we know there's 2 Lokis, or he pruned them. Well, we know that when you prune someone, they go to the end of time, or the void. Although I don't know how that works now, because they took care of the Lyeth. Now time is moving differently than the time, and does the loom pretty much imploding affect that? It's very interesting. I'm sure they have something cooked up. I really do trust in these writers and the producers and everyone for this season to deliver, and I just cannot wait, dude. It's like, oh my god, I can't believe it. 2 more episodes to go, and it's like, what's going to happen? I'm sure they're going to set it up. It's just great, dude. But again, I'm in it, man, and I thought this episode was just magnificent all around. Alright guys, well that is another episode, Man of Mischief. 2 more episodes to go, guys, in season 2. And I don't want a season 3, and I don't think there's going to be a season 3. But if we got a season 3, I wouldn't be mad, dude. I mean, the quality is just so high. It's crazy. This is a very different season than season 1. But season 1 kind of laid down the foundation, and I think visually they had better spectacle. We've spent a lot of time either at the TVA or in 1 or 2 locations in season 2. But the writing and the production value has been so high for season 2. It's a very different vibe, but it's so good, man. I'm just enjoying the heck out of it. So appreciate you guys. Go check out the other content. Until next week, guys. Time moves different than TVA.